resolve conflict a very significant part of your role as an effective manager? You know, I found that regardless of how effective you are in your role as a manager with your people skills, it always seems like there are situations that arise where there's conflict. Now, how you resolve that conflict will determine whether you're an average or an exceptional manager. As you consider the problem situations that you're involved in, I challenge you to think about one particular point that I hope you'll always keep in mind, and that's the importance of keeping an open mind. Now, that's a difficult thing to do. You know, we're born with an open mind, but very shortly thereafter it begins to close because of the conditioning that we get. And as a manager, we get conditioned to think in certain ways. It's tough to keep an open mind. One of the best examples of keeping an open mind happened to me recently as I was preparing for a presentation. I had made arrangements with the principal of our primary school or kindergarten class that I wanted to visit. I walked in that day. Now visualize this. I walked in, walked up to the board, and put a very small but legible dot on the board. I posed a question. Can any of you tell me what that dot is? What happened? After about 5 seconds, I think every hand in that room was up. And most of them were waving. They're saying, call on me, I'll tell you what it is. So I started going around the room. I think the first one said, that's a star in the sky. Second one, as I recall, said, that's a bug on my dad's windshield. Third one said, that's a telephone pole. I said, a telephone pole? He says, yeah, from the top end. I couldn't believe it. I went around the room. There were 30 different answers. What creativity. What an open mind these kids had. I went immediately from that class to the high school. I wanted a senior class. I had made the same arrangements there. I walked in. I did exactly the same thing. And I posed exactly the same question. What happened there? Just what's happening here. Silence. I couldn't believe it. I asked the question again. Finally, in the back of the room, one of the guys was just beginning to raise his hand, and I saw someone alongside of him just beginning to raise his hand. So I called on him. What did he say? That's a dot on the blackboard. I said, oh, that's good. I didn't want to discourage anybody else. I called on the other one. I said, what do you see? He said, that's a dot on the blackboard. Oh. Think about that, managers. Think about that. We've all been through that educational system. What is there about our educational system that closes our creativity? Now, in solving the tremendous, challenging problem and conflict situations that you come into as a manager, I challenge you to keep an open mind. Here's a very true statement. The amount a person uses his or her intelligence is inversely proportional to the amount of punishment they receive for using it. Think about that, managers. What does that mean to you in terms of how you're interacting with your people and how you respond when they come up with a new or a different or a diverse idea? I challenge you yourself to keep an open mind. And don't punish them for the creative new ideas that they come up with, or they'll not come up with any more. Now, as you think about those conflict situations and resolving the conflict that you experience as a manager, I would suggest that there are several general principles that we can deal with in handling conflict resolution. Principle number one, separate the people from the problem. A difficult thing to do at times, admittedly. But so often I'm asked, Jim, should you be hard or soft as a manager in handling a conflict situation? You know what my answer to that is? Yes. Yes. You can, as a matter of fact, be both soft and hard. You can be soft on the people but hard on the problem. If you as a manager will be careful to separate the people from the problem. You see, I believe you can disagree without being disagreeable if you separate the people from the problem. The second suggestion, you can be reflective. Now, this is particularly helpful when you find somebody who's very emotional, very upset, and you as a manager often have that happen. They come to you, they're all upset. What can you do? You can reflect back to them what you're hearing. I might say, Dan, gee, after you've just spouted off and given me all that, I say, you know, what I hear you saying is, and what do? I simply reflect back what I'm hearing. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to necessarily agree with what Dan is saying, but if I reflect back to him what he's saying, and particularly if it is irrational or emotional, he'll begin to realize that. And it slows down the situation, and it also shows you that I, your manager, understand exactly where you're coming from. Being reflective can be an important technique that you can use as a manager. The third technique, give positive nonverbal feedback. Imagine yourself sitting with an employee that's got a lot of problems and there's a lot of conflict there. If you're sitting there in this type of a posture, it certainly demonstrates something to them quite different than if you were leaning forward and nodding and listening, kind of on the edge of your chair. It says, boy, I really do care. So reflecting the nods, the understanding, the smile, being reflective can all make a big difference in terms of what is being perceived by the other party as you respond to this conflict situation. Number 4, take notes. That's particularly effective when you've got somebody that's particularly upset. Because what does it say to the other party when you're interested enough to be jotting down notes in regard to what they're saying? You can even use that on the telephone. Somebody's ranting and raving on the other end of the line. You say, excuse me, could you slow down just a minute? I want to make sure that I get down all of your concerns. Oh. They start saying, hey, this individual really cares. And all of a sudden, the emotion and the conflict in that environment begins to calm down. Number 5, sometimes respond to hostility and anger with understanding and with questions. Now, I'm not